meeting of the Beaufort County North Regional Plan Implementation Committee to order. If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Before we get into this, since I am no longer an appointed or elected official, I don't believe that I can continue to chair this meeting, even though it's we don't have a quorum. So just wanted to say that I've really appreciated being able to be your chair for a number of years, and may look forward to doing something with somebody different in the near future. But with that, I'd like to go ahead and ask the vice chair to go ahead and take over. And I think for now, you'll be the temporary chair until there's a quorum and there's either an election or
appointment.
So
there's no replacement for you at this point.
there is no replacement from the Metropolitan Planning Commission side. Our last meeting that we had, most everybody was virtual. I only had 3 members present, and so we went ahead and did a temporary chairmanship for the MPC at the last meeting, and I guess he will continue to be temporary until there's enough people there to go ahead and do an election. We had one new member that replaced me was there, and that was his first evening.
Okay, but they did not elect a chair.
No.
Okay.
No. Decided to just do a temporary chair.
All right.
Any other questions? Okay.
I'm glad
turn it over.
All right.
I may have to leave early because I've got a funeral today, unfortunately.
I'm sorry to hear that. Mike, and I know members of this committee, thank you for your leadership over the last several years. And I want to wish you all the successes. I know you'll continue in the public service to the community. So best wishes for that as well.
Thanks.
No question.
Sir?
I said no question at all.
No question.
Mike has been a great leader and a huge advocate both for MPC and for NERPIC, so we really appreciate it.
All right. I assume this meeting is being recorded, so we could proceed on the basis that the presentations will be of value to those who may tune in later, or we could postpone them till another time, another meeting. Is there any preference from the 3 committee members here?
I'm fine to proceed if they're prepared.
Mike?
I see Jared's not here, so.
Well, I guess
Yeah, I kind of asked everybody on a short notice to do this because I wanted to get an update before I left, because it's been a while before we have had any updates. And so I think it's appropriate to go ahead and move forward with the presentations, and then maybe we do them again at a later date when we do have more than 2 people here.
Sure, I would agree.
All right. Well, great. I agree as well. So with that in more understanding, I will proceed forward with the agenda items. Of course, the FOA public notification of this meeting has been published. We can't approve the minutes from March 25th because we don't have a quorum to do that. I don't see any citizens either here or on the hybrid that might want to have a comment for us. So with that in mind, I guess we can proceed to discussion items for purposes of the video that will be produced. First one up was Ladies Island transportation update from Jared Fralix.
Yeah, I'll be standing in for Jared. He's not here today.
Okay, great.
My name's Brittany Fields. I'm the Beaufort County's Transportation Program Manager, leading the 2018 1-cent sales tax program. Right now, we have one project that has been fully designed. We have put that out for construction bid, and we are looking to bring a recommendation to award that contract to our county council in September and a notice to proceed for construction in October.
Which project is that?
That's Airport Frontage Road, Phase 1. That's from Lost Island to Airport Circle. We have two projects that are currently on hold. One of them is Mayfair Court. That was put on hold due to citizens' responses of connecting that road to a private road, along with the Beaufort High School realignment. So we are, for the Beaufort High School realignment, looking at alternatives to make their current entrance better for transportation needs.
Do you see within the next 30 days or so, those two projects might be moved forward, or is this
Yes.
your term?
No, Mayfair Court is permanently on hold. Beaufort High School realignment, it's on hold at the moment until we can have further discussions with both the church and the Parks and Rec, the Passive Park property, as the alignment was going to go through both of those properties, and the Rue du Bois option is not feasible for the program's limited funds.
Is this the one that makes the four-way at Hazel Farm Road?
Yes, sir.
And so that's still in discussion with the church and the
It's not,
Crystal?
the project's on hold.
It's on hold.
Yes, sir.
It went to the
Public
Facilities Committee.
Yes. And I
June.
can provide that PowerPoint slide. We went to the Public Facilities Committee in June to bring some alternatives, and from that point, we were put on hold.
Okay.
The mainline corridor, Sunset Boulevard, Miller Drive West, and Hazel Farm, Gay Drive, along with the new realignment of Ladies Island Drive, are all in design. And we're working through SCDOT comments.
So highly unfair question, since the 1-cent didn't, since the county turned down the infrastructure, what are we looking at for funding sources?
So we will find out in August whether or not we are approved for a $25 million raise grant. And we're just actively looking at other grant opportunities and infrastructure money as it's coming down.
Where did you say this grant's from?
This is a raise grant through the Department of Transportation.
US, right?
Yes.
Is it? Yeah.
That's the same as the old Tiger grant.
Mm-hmm.
That we did not distribute.
Correct.
That's a good question. I was thinking the same thing, as a turn down of the Citizen Committee recommendations on transportation, where puts a few things on hold, I would imagine.
It has. Through the 2018 sales tax, we did collect an additional about $16 million, which has been allocated to the Pathways and Sidewalks program. So the pathways and sidewalks that we're looking at on Ladies Island are Middle Road, which is currently in design, and we are also going to be looking at Meridian Road for a pathway and sidewalk.
Anything else you want to tell us?
That's it.
I'm sure we'll be looking forward to the further updates.
Absolutely.
Chair,
Yes.
couple questions. I met with the Catholic Diocese last week. As an extension, so to speak, of the county, but my conversation with the diocese, I think we had 7 or 8 persons there, including their real estate attorney and the diocese. So they weren't totally objectionable to this as a possibility. They they understood what the county is trying to accomplish engineering-wise. But they would like to have further communication. I believe they're in the process of writing a letter to the county. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to say, but I would guess that if you haven't already received one, that you will be receiving one. My purpose in going there was to not talk about the engineering, but to talk about the Ladies Island Village Center project. But obviously we did have to get into the roadway systems. And I've already spoken with you about some of the issues that I don't think I need to bring up. Well, the one thing I would like to point out was that when we talked about the Village Center project, they saw that as a real positive thing for them in the way it might be able to come about. And I also discussed with them the potential of a trolley system being incorporated, and they viewed that as a very positive thing as well. So I think there are some positives that could come out of this, and part of that I talked about the potential with the way the Village Center plan is developed, that there may be able to be shared parking at some point in the future between their facilities and what develops maybe for the shopping center that is adjacent to them. They saw that as a positive, as well as the having the transportation available. So just wanted to share that.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mike. All right, will you be continuing that form of public service working with?
In my discussions with Eric, I believe that I'll stay engaged
Good.
at some level.
All right, well, thank you. Any other comments regarding this topic? All right, thank you, Brittany. Appreciate it. All right, Mr. Merchant, Ladies Island Village Center Master Plan, do you want to update us?
Yeah, so I guess to make a long story short, we are still in negotiations with the firm, and I don't really want to go into great detail about that. But the plan is to have a 2 or 3 day charrette or workshop on the Village Center community, probably within, in the October timeframe. And we see this more of it's more of an implementation plan than starting from scratch, because we have a lot of good groundwork in the Village Center community. And so one of the things that we're working on in our communications with staff, with the firm that we're negotiating with, is how can we use this opportunity to kind of jumpstart redevelopment, to better communicate the Village Center ideas, to work through some sticking points, such as, one that comes to mind is drive-throughs, having a better approach to that, so that there's an expectation of what you can do in the area, but also that we're not entertaining development that is counter to the vision for that area. So, and the idea is that we work through those issues kind of on a higher level, and then we task staff with implementing them in the ordinance work. So I really don't have more to report at this point, because we're still in communication with them.
Do you see that coming to fruition, the negotiations and the settlement on
Yes.
moving forward in the next 30
It's
days?
just the timing is bad for right now, and so we're just not, don't have more to report than that. But
Hopefully in the August meeting, maybe.
yes, and I'm, I think that there's a real opportunity, because, I've always been advocating that the city and the county are 95% of the way there, with our ordinances. We have these projects coming online. We have a lot of positive things happening. And I see the purpose of this Village Center is kind of working through how to really take advantage of all these opportunities, build on them, but also, I think that one of our issues is that this vision for the Ladies Island Village Center could really use some articulating and a means of making that clear to the public or to developers just what that is. We have everything written down in metrics, but it's still, I think a lot of people have trouble visioning that area and transforming over time. And so we see an opportunity to do that through this process.
Good. Other questions? No. Any comments from the public?
I would just have one. The Ladies Island Village Center task force is still a task force for this group for NERPIC, and the task force has not met because this has been kind of in flux now for a long time. And when last we put it on the table, y'all voted that we needed to move forward with a consultant. So that's what's happening, or that's what's in the process now. At that point, and the work that the task force had done up until then, we thought we were fairly solid on what the access roads were going to be. And I think that if there's any way that those access roads can be tied down prior to actually having the charrette, it would be a kind of a chicken and the egg. I think it'd be really, at least at the minimum, helpful, because that planning process really needs to happen around the determination of access roads.
One of the things that I think most people are aware, the county took official action to allocate $25,000 for this project, and the city did as well. So we have right now, we're working with a budget of $50,000. And so that that's kind of where we are as far as the scope of the project really has to kind of match that budget, or we need to work with the city and the county to readjust those numbers. But that's kind of where we are right now.
Okay. Well, it sounds like there's a lot going on as it relates to the village task force, the development of the village center. Good.
Has the financial budget been a pitfall from the standpoint of the consultant?
I think it's a challenge, let's put it that way. And so that's something that we may be working with, with the county and the city as we move forward.
They're demanding a lot more.
It's very hard to get things done for that amount, when you're talking about somebody bringing in a team and mobilizing for several days. So the challenge with staff has been, how do we craft this in such a way that we're getting the most out of, with the budget that we have.
All right. Anybody else? Thank you. All right, the last discussion topic we've got, we talked just about everything, I guess. Climate change, sea level rise, resiliency. That's and the projects that Juliet has been working on.
Yeah, thanks, Brittany.
Hold on, we're gonna make
Thank you,
sure we
Brittany.
get it up and running. If it's all right with you, I might stand up at the podium.
Sure,
Or
absolutely.
wherever you would like me.
Sure.
Okay, just so hopefully, we
This
don't
is
have issues.
what she presented.
Yeah, you've seen this before.
I know, go to my funeral.
Okay,
Not making-
understandable.
Not making any
I don't-
comparisons.
I don't take it personally.
I'm sure I learned something new from the last time I saw it.
And I just want to make sure, Stephanie, I know you're online. Can you see this okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so thank you all for allowing me to take some time out of your morning to give you an update on the most recent sea level rise data coming from NOAA. It was released this past February, as well as updates on some of the things the county's doing to address what we anticipate coming down the pipeline for sea level rise with regard to improving our resilience and better understanding the situation here on the ground. I am going to, for the record, state my name, Juliana Smith. I'm the long range planner here at Beaufort County's Planning and Zoning Department. And I'm going to be honing my discussion on what's being done to what the planning department is doing. There's other departments in the county addressing things in a different way, but I wanted to hone on what we're doing. So I will start off with the publication that came out this past February. This was released by NOAA. It's an update from their 2017 technical sea level rise technical report. This is serving as the 2022 sea level rise technical report. What the scientists did is they went in with the most updated data, modeling. They have added observational data since 2017 and updated our extrapolations for what sea level rise will be, not just out to 2100, which is the typical time horizon we're thinking about, but also to 2050. So bringing it within a closer range over the next 28 years. And they broke down the United States. They gave it an average for what we expect for the entire country, but of course an average is pretty broad when you're considering that big of a land piece, a land mass. So they broke it down into 8 different regions. Each region has its own average of sea level rise to be anticipated. Some places will have more, some will have less. For example, Alaska is expecting to see a sea level rise or sea level reduction, not a rise. So to start us off, the United States in general, maybe we can we minimize the little, it's gonna throw me off.
Small.
Yeah. There we go. So for the United States, the average is between 10 to 14 inches by 2050. So over the next 28 years. Now here in the southeast, like other regions in the lower 48, we expect to see more than that average. We will see in the southeast region 12 to 19 inches of sea level rise by 2050, so the next 28 years. Now, I wanted to try and find as much information as I could about what we will see here in Beaufort County locally, because the southeastern region covers 4 different states. And so fortunately, NOAA has gone into each of the tide gauges, NASA actually has gone into each of the NOAA tide gauges to take a look at any tide gauge that has at least 50 plus years of data and extrapolate sea level rise inches or meters up to the year 2050. So we have 2030 data, we have 2040 data, we have 2050 data, but I'm going to be taking a look for the purposes of today, sticking to that 2050 time frame. Now here in Beaufort County, we don't have our own NOAA tide gauge, so I'm going to use the 2 closest. And this is actually what's done to predict our tide schedules on a regular basis. So we'll be looking at Fort Pulaski and Charleston's tide gauges. We'll start with Fort Pulaski. So I think the most important information on this slide is going to be the line chart that you see there and the figures to the left of it. So the line chart shows the sea level rise that we have already seen over the last 100 years. So this has been an ongoing process. We have seen for Fort Pulaski a foot of sea level rise since the 1930s, so over the past century. What we anticipate to see out to 2050 based on this data and other geological processes happening here locally is between a foot to a foot and a half by 2050. So we will see the same amount of sea level rise in the next 28 years that we have seen over the last century. And so the big takeaway there is there's an acceleration in the rate of sea level rise happening. Now this range right here really has a lot to do with carbon emissions. So your foot is going to be the conservative end and your foot and a half is dependent on how extreme those carbon emissions get over the next 30 years. And it is about the same for Charleston. So I think it's pretty safe to say that this is generally what our region will see by 2050 with regard to sea level rise, between 12 to 20 inches. The big difference here, it's kind of minor, I guess, if you're looking at numbers, but Charleston has seen 1 foot, 1 inch sea level rise over the past 100 years. So they're on a little bit of a higher rate there. So what does that mean for us? Well, we know we have a lot of wetlands here in Beaufort County. About 50% of the acreage in Beaufort County is salt marsh. We all probably in this room have a pretty good idea of what sea level rise will do with regard to our saltwater surfaces. We'll have marsh migration, we'll have open water where salt marshes previously existed, we'll have that surface flooding coming in from our coastal edges. But we also have about 16% freshwater wetlands, and that's, I think we're still trying to determine exactly what that means, and some of the work I'm going to talk about here momentarily does address kind of our freshwater areas, especially with regard to groundwater. We might expect some of those freshwater areas to become saline areas over time with sea level rise, or to cause their own flooding issues. So these are things to be thinking about when we're thinking about impacts here in Beaufort County, at least with regard to sea level rise. But we do know, at the very least, we'll expect more flood days. This is Fort Pulaski data over the last 100 years for the number of flood days that have been recorded there. So you can see right away, if you're looking at the bar chart, especially down here, we've had in recent years, this is 2020 and 2019, a doubling of the flood days that we're seeing on average at the Fort Pulaski tide gauge. Now, just for definition's sake, a flood day is considered a day where you have over 9.2 feet above mean lower low water. And mean lower low water is taking the lowest low tide of every day, averaging it out, and that number. So 9.2 feet above that number happening at least once a day equals a flood day. Does that make sense? I know it's a little, we're tracking that. So if we reach that threshold at least once a day, you get a flood day. So that's how they put together this data. So we know flooding's happening more in the area. We know it will happen at an increased frequency through the sea level rise technical report data that just came out in 2022, this year. What they talked about in addition to sea level rise is increased frequencies of flood events. And so generally speaking, we are going to see increased instances of flooding happening throughout Beaufort County, where king tides are going to become a more regular thing. And I personally feel like I'm seeing that already, and maybe some of you all agree. Feels like we're hitting king tides more and more frequently. One of the important things to note, some of these events that we've seen in the past in Beaufort County with regard to what we would call major coastal flooding or extreme flooding is associated with tropical events. That's not necessarily going to be the case in the future. As we have sea level rise happen, we're going to have more volumes of water. And so if you have a particularly high king tide with the right winds in the right direction at the right speed and strength, you might hit a major coastal flooding event without even having that tropical event kind of promoting it and creating it. So this is an increased frequency is our takeaway from that. We will see this more frequently and more to the norm in our communities. So what can we do? How can we respond to this? Fortunately, there's a lot of work that's been done throughout Beaufort County that's already given us the leg up on a lot of this. We have really strong zoning codes that help promote protecting places like our river buffers, our open space areas, wetland preservation. All of that works together to protect not just those ecosystems and the services they provide, like buffering storm surge and taking in floodwaters, but also helps us guide where infrastructure goes so that we're not putting it in those vulnerable areas. Recently, we have changes on our limits to dirt fill. So again, this is specific to some of our lowest lying areas, and that helps again keep us from building in places that we know are going to flood in the near future. We also recently updated our comprehensive plan and our green print plans. The comprehensive plan was adopted this past November. I'm sure y'all are all aware of this. This isn't news to you. But one of the really exciting new things for our comprehensive plan update is that a resilience element was intentionally interwoven throughout that document. So it helps guide many of our recommendations for policies and actions to take over the next 10 to 20 years here in Beaufort County. In addition to that, during our green print plan update, we had a green print mapping update as well. And for the first time, that mapping was converted into what we call a green print overlay and integrated into our comprehensive plan. And what that mapping does is help our Rural and Critical Lands Board kind of understand where to target conservation efforts, but when you compare it or pair it with our sea level rise data and what we anticipate from climate change, it helps us understand our future land uses and how growth should be balanced with that as well. So that's a new component to our comprehensive plan this year. So that's some of the work that's been done. Let's talk about some of the work that's ongoing. So the first that's happening is we have, in 2018, a sea level rise task force came together at the county and started creating a long-term resilience plan. Now, of course, we have worked it through the pandemic and staff changes and all of the things that happen in life regularly outside of that. And so we have a draft. It just needs some buttoning up to get out into the world and begin to make the rounds and be official. But the good news is that long-term resilience plan has several action items that were incorporated into our comprehensive plan through that update process, since those things were happening side by side. So we do have some of the recommendations in this plan already in action through the comprehensive plan. Overall, though, just as a preview, the general strategy outlined in the long-term resilience plan, and this mirrors the state's upcoming resilience plan because the state is working on one as well, is a general policy of collecting data, sharing data, planning based on that data, taking action, and then reevaluating as we observe more impacts, learn more information. We also recently installed tide gauges here in Beaufort County. I know the city did that as well. And this is really important because, as you saw from our previous slides, we have 2 NOAA tide gauges within the region, one in Fort Pulaski, one in Charleston. And we're taking extrapolations from those tide gauges to understand the real life things that are happening here. So this past, through the South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium, Beaufort County and the city of Beaufort as well was able to purchase tide gauges with some funding assistance and have them installed where they needed them. I think the city is out at the waterfront park right on the marina there. And then for Beaufort County, we partnered with the Port Royal Sound Foundation. They put one up out at their Maritime Center on Chessie Creek, which is what this photo is right here. We also partnered with the Fripp Island Nature Center to get one out on the Waddell Fishing Pier out in Skull Creek. So the tide gauge for the Port Royal Sound Foundation went online in the fall, and the Fripp Island tide gauge went online this past spring. It's still going through its 90 days, getting everything right, period. But I think what's really interesting is we're already seeing why it's important to have local tide data. So if you take a look at that chart on the bottom there, that is tide data coming from this past June. And what you'll see when you're looking at it is the bottom light colored dotted line, that light blue dotted line, that is the Noaa prediction for our tide schedules here. So this is the information that they're getting from the Charleston gauge and the Fort Pulaski gauge to estimate what we expect to see here. The dark blue line is what we're actually observing. So we're already learning that their prediction isn't quite what's happening here. We are seeing slightly higher tides than what they anticipate that we will see. So that's good. We're getting real-time data. As we collect data, this will give us a better picture of what to anticipate in the future, but it's also impacting resilience today. The Fripp Sea Island Rescue Team, which is essentially the emergency response team out on Fripp, is very excited about the tide gauge that's been installed out there because it will help them know what's really happening around Fripp hyper-locally when they're responding to emergencies. So it's giving us daily resilience improvements and helping us plan for our future. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is one of the big projects that is ongoing right now, and this is a study to take a look at what's happening to groundwater. I mentioned at the top that we're not entirely sure how our freshwater systems are going to respond with sea level rise. One of the big priorities for this project is to better understand how groundwater, so if you look here, that's the water in the infographic there, the water beneath the surface of the earth, how our groundwater will change with sea level rise and what that means for our underground infrastructure. One of our higher priorities being what that means for septic systems that are throughout unincorporated Beaufort County. Here on this side is one of our groundwater researchers from the University of South Carolina with a groundwater monitoring well that was installed out at Southside Park. So that's what that is there. There are 2 sides to this study. There's the data collection on groundwater side, and there's also the community capacity engagement side. So I'll talk about where we are on both of those and give just a general overview. But these groundwater monitoring wells have been put all throughout the county. I'll get into that here in just a second. Now, the project itself is called Beaufort County Adapts, Sea Level Rise Impacts Beneath Our Feet. It is a NOAA-funded project through their ADSI program. We are doing it in partnership with the South Carolina Sea Island Coalition. Sea Grant Consortium. So many. The SCC Grant Consortium. I wanted to say Coastal Conservation League because Jesse's sitting there. The University of South Carolina, that's our groundwater researching side of the partnership. The College of Charleston, where our social scientists and some of our extra GIS help is coming from, and the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, which is helping us with engagement and outreach through their ACE Basin NER program. So those are our partners on this. It's a 2-year-long grant period. There is the option to take it further as we get closer to that timeline and see if we need more information and data. And what it is doing is looking at groundwater. So this is just an extra graphic to show you all. I think to kind of illustrate some of the concerns we have about what groundwater will do. If you look at the dark blue area, you're before sea level rise versus your light blue area after sea level rise. It's anticipated that sea level rise will shift groundwater up. If you see the dark black line there that's squiggling across the graphic, the light blue is above that line in some instances, and this is your land line here. And so you're seeing how previously dry areas before sea level rise are now wet areas. So these are things that concern us, and we want to make sure we fully understand so we can prepare. So to do this project, what we have done is identified 4 low-lying areas throughout the county that we know have had and continue to have chronic flooding issues in some instances. They are communities in St. Helena, so that is Warsaw Island and the Corners community. We have the Mossy Oaks community in the city of Beaufort, the Shell Point community in the town of Port Royal, and the All Joy community outside of Bluffton. So these are the 4 communities we're working in. These are our groundwater researchers. On the far side here in the black is Dr. Alicia Wilson. She is our premier groundwater researcher. That's her team of students who are working on this project with her. They got 15 groundwater monitoring wells installed in Beaufort County this past spring. So those wells are augured down into the ground. They sit 10 feet below the surface of the earth. They are taking data on the height of groundwater as it moves, and they are taking data on the salinity of groundwater. That's another concern with sea level rise and saltwater intrusion into our groundwater systems. What they will do with that data, which they're collecting over at least the next year, is they will compare it to the observed tide ranges we have here in Beaufort County during the time that they're collecting the data on the groundwater. They will compare it to weather events, so our storms we've been having recently. Hopefully they won't have hurricanes to compare it to, but if that happens, that type of information, and then comparing it to droughts in order for us to understand how groundwater reacts to these different impacts. With regard to the tide data, the comparisons between the tide data and the groundwater, what they will be able to do from there is develop understandings of trends between how high our tides are and how high our groundwater is at that time, and then extrapolate out based on the NOAA predictions for sea level rise for that 12 to 20 inches that we anticipate seeing. So that'll help give us a better understanding of how much our groundwater will fluctuate. They've also arranged these groundwater monitoring wells so that some are close to the marsh and some are further inland and a little upland, so we can also anticipate how far in those impacts go when we're thinking about the elevation of the county out here. So as far as where these things are, we have 7 groundwater monitoring wells in the St. Helena area. 3 of them are on Warsaw Island. We worked with a private citizen to put wells on his property. He was very, very great to work with us on that. 2 are along Highway 21 between Warsaw and the Corners community. We worked with the Beaufort County Open Land Trust to do that. You can actually see in the photo is one of the wells going on a Beaufort County Open Land Trust property over there by Superior Coffee. And then 2, we worked with the Penn Center to get placed in the Corners community. So 1 is out at the Martin Luther King Jr. Park, the green, and then the other is over by the St. Helena Library. In the Mossy Oaks community, we have 4 wells. 3 of them are out south side. We worked with the city of Beaufort staff to get that done. Made sure we put those wells outside of the envelope of the improvements that we expect to be happening there. We also have 1 on Beaufort County property over at the pickleball courts, so very nearby, the same area. 2 are in Shell Point. These are on Beaufort County Parks property with the Shell Point Park, and then 2 are in the Alljoy community on Passive Park property there. So wells are in, taking data. The other side of this, of the engagement update, so we're about to really gear up our public engagement and community engagement side of this. What's been done thus far is we've started making contacts and relationships in the Shell Point and Alljoy communities, and we have had one public meeting so far with the Warsaw Eustis communities out on St. Helena. That public meeting was specifically about sea level rise, but we also took that opportunity to introduce our project team and this project so we can begin forming those relationships and get ready for the next phases. There will be several community meetings to start getting information from our community members about what they see, what they think the adaptation pathways are, what their capacity is to deal with these issues. And then we will also have our social science researchers out there with the graduate students that's starting this fall to start doing targeted interviews and surveys with interested community members. In addition to that, we have a community-engaged intern who is serving through the summer with us with the Sea Grant Consortium. She's working on creating public outreach products and materials to better explain groundwater. There's a lot of confusion, understandably, between stormwater and groundwater, and they do intermix. They do have impacts on each other, but we're specifically looking at the groundwater side of things, so we want to make that as clear as possible. She's also helping us create a website. And then this is from our meeting. We worked with Councilman Glover, but this past spring to get a meeting with the Eustis Warsaw community. So we'll be gearing that up more here in the coming months to get more information and more outreach happening in our selected communities. But that is where that project stands. It's supposed to wrap up the end of 2023, but we'll see. We might make it go longer. And with that, those are my updates on everything. So if you all have any questions, I'm open for that. The contact information there. If you need it.
I have a question.
Yes,
You
sir.
mentioned further phases.
Mhm.
After your research is complete and you've collected the data and you've analyzed it, I'm going to tell you, I don't know. But are you preparing for some involvement, further involvement down the road when you say these further phases, or corrective action plans or mitigation efforts, or?
I think, and Rob can back me up or not on this depending on what I say, but the data will give us a baseline to work with on what we anticipate, a timeline we anticipate impacts happening to underground infrastructure and how big those impacts are going to be. So that will help give us guidance on what needs to be done. I don't know yet that we know if specific recommendations will come from this, so at least we'll have the data. Now, with regard to our community side of things, the intention is to start creating those relationships so we can work with them on finding solutions and understand their capacity to go along and be a part of implementing those solutions as well. So that's where we are with that, if that answers your question.
Yeah, and I'll just say that one of our concerns is, in the Eustis and Warsaw Island communities have been wonderful to work with. But I think there's going to be a point in the future where it's like, now what? What can we do to take action? And so that's something that we want to look at carefully. And, part of the danger is there's a lot of grant money out right now and a lot of ideas, and we don't want to overpromise. And one example is we've been looking at living shorelines as a possible solution to stabilize some of the shores, but we're learning that certain types of shores, it's not very effective. And so, we've been very careful about offering solutions. And so we want to make sure that we want to learn from this study and figure out what are some steps we can take, to help places like Warsaw Island, where you have families that have been there for generations, remain on the island, but there's a certain point where there are things we can do and things we can't do. I mean, I don't think that we're looking at levees, because we just have such a very long shoreline. So that type of solution that might work in an urban area like Charleston, I don't think is realistic in Beaufort. So we are anxious to identify what those next steps are, but we also want to be really careful and not overpromise and take a realistic view of what really can be done to help prepare.
And I will add, we're working on understanding the groundwater. Our stormwater department's working on understanding the surface flooding, the stormwater. So when we get all of our data independently and bring it together to give us a fuller picture of the impacts happening as well. So hopefully open more avenues.
Yeah.
Well, I think too, just the use of water, the increase of population and the use of water. So recently with the Beaufort Jasper Water Sewer Authority, we're asking people to cut back on watering, during this extremely hot period of time. Lawns die, plants die. People are somewhat not thinking about their usage of water. Some real education, awareness, understanding of the criticality of our groundwaters and saltwater intrusion. A lot of the negative things happening to our water system from things like septic tanks and
Right.
seepage.
Right. Yes.
So it's an extremely important issue, and you can't get started too soon on this. And we've been talking about these things for a long time.
Agreed.
This is great.
Thank you.
I think you should do this
Any
for the
other
realtors.
questions?
Okay.
For the what?
Realtors. That advocacy needs to be fine-tuned because they really need to be more tuned to what's happening from that standpoint, so.
Yeah, and I think, we certainly we had to kind of take a step back. We were working on notification or disclosure, and I think that maybe at this point is a step too far, but I think that education, that having a realistic view of these low-lying areas, and as we do this work on a day-to-day, our staff review team, we're looking at lots on Fripp and Harbor. The ones that are left over are barely peaking up above the salt marsh, and people want to build on them.
Right.
So we're seeing that the market is not necessarily getting a sober view of kind of where we're going.
Right, we don't have issues with septic over there, but you still have infiltration
Yeah.
and exposures from stormwater
Yes.
and otherwise, and I think,
Damage from
Those are-
flooding and
yeah.
all of that. Yes, absolutely. Especially on those marsh edges.
and I appreciate the commentary about the living shorelines because I remember a huge study they did down in Florida regarding the living shorelines and implemented millions and millions of dollars only for it to erode away
Yeah.
because it didn't work.
Yeah.
So the resiliency to the resiliency plan would be really smart.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. And
We can learn from past errors.
you're absolutely right. And we want to make sure when we're thinking about living shorelines, we're, like Rob was saying, putting them in places where they make sense, where they'll work, not just throwing them out there and hoping for the best.
Saying this is going to be the gold silver bullet.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And especially when we're dealing with private property owners on a place like Warsaw Island, they're seeing the impacts of the water creeping up on our property. And you get into a situation where we're, saying, hey, look at us, we're helping you, we're doing this living shoreline. And if it doesn't work,
Yeah.
then I think we're in a worse situation in the future. And, so I think just having a very realistic view of what can be done, what can't, and trying to take those steps that'll,
Do the most good.
be able to do the most good and help these communities.
Thank you,
It's
Juliana. Your
efficient.
message is well received, and I would say spread it wide and far.
Yes. I'll be at Soloco on Tuesday, so.
Okay,
All right.
Hopefully it'll be well received there too.
thank you.
I think with the normal, this next item is the prioritized list of items. Since the last update of 325, I'm sure there's lots of things to be updated. I don't know how formed the two of us are in all this.
Yeah.
But if there's anything, Mike, in particular, you want to draw attention to?
No, I mean, I read over them when I got the review for today, and I think most of it's pretty much current where we are and what we're looking at. The things that we are still analyzing, the things we basically put on hold are basically where we are, so I don't think there's any major shifts.
I had two things that I just wanted to bring up real quickly. I see there, impact fees was added at the March meeting by Mayor Murray. Haven't heard anything much recently. Do you know where things stand?
Well, I know, we have progressed. We've got an AGI review on one that we've received and staff is reviewing, and then there were some questions, and so, we are working on that, so. And I think, I'm not speaking for the other municipalities, but I think we all got it at the same time, so.
So there is a working committee or a working group?
Yeah, I'm not really
Impact
prepared to
fees.
speak on the
Okay, all
progress of it right now.
right, I understand. Did you want to add anything, Rob, regarding the Northern Plan Improvement, intergovernmental agreement revisions and?
I have nothing to add at this
Boundaries.
point. I think that we're kind of a little bit on hold just because of the transition the city's going through with the, hiring a planning director. I think that that's a project that involves that joint land use plan or agreement on future zoning in the Eustis community, and that's something that I think we probably want to work with the new planning director once they're on board.
Yeah, the Eustis community, also the Northern Regional Corridor.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have any other questions regarding the action items.
Just one thing I wanted to bring up is, we really don't have, and this is, wish we had a few more members here, we don't have a very detailed system of how we appoint members, but I think that we would be looking to the city to identify who you want to represent from Metro. Since Mike Tomey was our.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. That was going to be one of my comments at the end, but I'll piggyback on you. Yes, with the turnover in a few county council people.
Are not elected officials, but, so that's just something, we've lost both a member and the chair of
Yeah,
the implementation committee.
when I first came on the NERPIC, I remember that discussion, I think, from Mayor Murray and Mayor DeVito regarding the alternate use of the chairs for the MPC and Beaufort County Planning Commission. I've been able to find anything in writing, anything I can put my hands on in any of the
I think
official.
it's just something that
public
we've, over the
documents.
years, that
Okay.
we've.
So I think as long as the committee can come to an agreement how we want to do it, I'm open to that process. All right. Actually, that was going to be my roundtable comment. Mike, did you want to? Well, I guess that's where we're at with roundtable comments. Do you have anything that you'd like to add at this point?
Well, we've been, in conversation with the sea level rise and the groundwater course with the study that we're doing on the point in the downtown area for drainage, they did their last presentation on Friday, and it was very well received. And we've had several, Ryan's been to council work sessions, and we've done reviews of what they're finding as far as the project core at over $28 million for potential mitigation, but we have prioritized with about half that expense with like 10 or 11 points of that would make major impacts as far as that is concerned in the downtown area. And that's being very, very closely dovetailed with sea level rise and the resiliency issues that we've been talking about, because we recognize the importance of that as well. And the county's been a partner with that on us in several aspects. So it is definitely a regional issue, and we're all dealing with it. So and the city in its topographical location is specifically burdened with dealing with those kinds of issues as well, which is why we're very happy to have the Noaa gauge on this waterfront park as well.
Okay.
So
Well, there's certainly a lot going on around the county
is.
municipalities. In that regard, is there any presentation or do you think that would be beneficial to this group, say at the next meeting? Any major initiative or project that would be inclusive of the regional awareness?
I would encourage, it's recorded in our both Friday's meeting and the work session meeting, which was about 3 weeks ago. with Ryan Phillips and the engineering group from, I would encourage you to watch that. It's very interesting. I know, Rob, you've seen it. You've seen the presentation, haven't you?
I don't know if I have.
The most recent one is, the update that they've done on that one is pretty interesting. And of course, a lot of it is technical with reference to engineering and outfalls and all of that stuff. But you come to the reality, which I'm sure all of the entities, all the constituencies will come to the reality that much of what we're dealing with as far as the problems are the fact that outdated systems are just failing. And they're not, it's not that the engineering of what they intended to do is inappropriate. It's the fact that silt and collapse and otherwise have created non-functioning, outlets. So that creates a lot of immediate addressing stuff that we can make some changes that are not necessarily inexpensive, but identifiable from the standpoint of that, not on the topographical shift or change that we do on the area, but then always having that data available for us so that as we go in to put underground utilities in and new pavement and so forth, that we put those thoughts in process when we're planning with our partners with reference to improvements in those areas. So
Are you recommending that perhaps they could prepare a presentation for the NERPIC?
or at least make the PowerPoints provide, to our committee, which we can certainly do.
Okay, would that be through you or should I?
Yeah, I can have the city do that.
Great. Anything else? Emil? No? I'm sure I'll be hearing from you for long.
I was gonna just say one thing, just for future thinking for everyone in the room. One of the big data gaps that we have, and this might be across the board in a lot of places, we don't have really any data on what rain trends are in the area because they vary so hyper locally.
I'm sorry, what time?
Rain trends, rainfall. We anticipate impacts as a result of climate change, but we have no data to look back on to see what that might be, and we currently don't have sensors out there to really collect that information other than citizen scientists who might be a part of the COCO RAWs. So that's definitely something that we're thinking about, and just want to put that out there. We need more information on that.
In the last 2 weekends or any indication, we certainly are seeing an uptick.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
There's a citizen science group, as you know, probably,
Yes.
through the Port Royal Sound Foundation. They've trained about 75 people, but they do mostly, sampling, water sampling, salinity, turbidity,
Okay.
all of that. But I can't see why rain gauges couldn't be part of their work.
That's a good point.
They've got some significant presence on Kalawasi Island, but I believe also on Oldfield, Spring Island, and we could spread that out, obviously. But that could be a source of some information, a citizen science group.
Thank you.
I've got rain gauge in my yard. I can always tell you what it is if I can remember.
Yeah.
If I can remember to empty it out after the first one.
There's a state-led program too that I think might be
Yes.
good to
Yep.
connect with. Yeah.
And we may, it may be that as good as having citizen scientists, maybe just investing in different areas around the county, having
Sure.
monitoring
Yep.
information.
is there a statewide, the program statewide, is that, can you disseminate that with reference to because I've seen one of those
The COCO RAWs
programs.
program.
Is that the one that tells you how to monitor your gauges and where to place them and all that stuff?
And you do.
Because that would be very helpful.
I think you go through a training. If you're a part of the official program, I believe you're reporting every morning, is my basic understanding, what you see in your tie gauge or don't see, depending.
Right.
So-
Rain gauge.
Oh, yeah, sorry, rain gauge.
Rain
Still on tie
gauge.
gauges.
Wrong water source. Yeah,
Yeah,
because I have
sure.
several, we have in the Pigeon Point area, in the downtown area, we have citizens that are monitoring it because they've called me on the amount of rain that we've gotten over the last week. And I really want to know where the rain gauges are located
Mhm.
to know, because like from Pigeon Point to the point, there's like a 2-inch difference. I'm not really sure that would probably be realistic, but maybe.
It could be, they can be really
They can,
local
but-
impacts. Well, I can pull what's out there and share it through, I guess, Chris, would I send it to you?
Yeah, that would be
Send
good
to
if there's-
everybody on the, we can do that.
Sure.
And if you are on that same vein, I could put the sea level rise technical report in there if you're interested in looking at it. They also published an application guide for coastal planners and leaders to what do we do with this data now that we have it,
Yep.
which I'm working through. I could share that too if y'all are interested.
And I was serious that I think maybe a presentation to the Realtors Association on
Okay.
this would be engaged, and I'll be happy to speak with Janet and to the
Okay.
organization.
Yeah, we kind of left it at, when we kind of took a step back from that coastal resilience overlay, that we would do more outreach. And so I think
That would be good.
that's perfectly, we have kind of a foot in the door already.
Right,
of
and
to come back.
groundwater intrusion, I mean, going back to the Coleman, and, initiatives from DHEC and from the state health department when the well waters were being infiltrated by the groundwater issues and the septic systems and so forth. And that was 50 years ago. I mean, it really is the same kind of analysis from the standpoint of how now a naturally occurring event is going to affect the same situation that we could have in infiltration and inundation in those septic systems and exposures.
Yeah, and we did have a meeting with DHEC Septic Department who issues those permits to just learn more about it since it is such a concern for us here, groundwater impacting those systems. And one of the things that really was kind of a wow factor for me walking away from that meeting is that they do not keep track of where these septic systems are or how old they are. So you don't know there's a problem unless someone notices it and
Yeah.
reports it. Otherwise, they're in the ground having these impacts happening to them. So that's a big concern.
I mean, from permitting standpoints, they're very specific with reference to
Right.
the geographic locations of the outfall,
Absolutely,
the
yes.
drain fields and wells and so forth. By best practices, if those are adhered to when people put them in, the downside is, of course, as we know in all situations, and final permitting on the septic system typically is fairly regimented. But then when new wells are drilled and people fail to recognize the distance to and from, and very few of the well drillers worry about that as much as they should from the standpoint of where your septic system is and where your drain fields are and so forth. So there can be unintentional infiltration where, it was not obviously as keen from the awareness of where things are located, but yeah. Realtors could help some there, or hinder, depending on.
But we would be happy to give a presentation.
I'll talk to Janet, I think it would be something good. And just to bring in, because it could also open up avenues for opportunities for other groundwater wells to be administered if we feel there's a need to add to that network, because property owners and realtors have contacts in that respect, so.
Okay.
Okay, with that, I don't think that we have anything else for the agenda. Any other comments, inputs? All right, well, I guess we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate the presentations very much.
Yeah, I do too.
I feel like
Learned a
you're
lot.